Hey there, thanks for tuning into Duckbricks. I'm Chris, and LEGO is releasing their very first official Disney Lilo and Stitch building set this March. Well, we've gotten a ton of Stitch minifigures in Disney collectible minifigure series of the past. This is the first time we are actually getting a full-on LEGO set based off of the movie and the subsequent series, which is really exciting, and when images of this dropped, people went crazy. So join me as we take an early look at the brand new LEGO Lilo and Stitch Beach House, as well as the other LEGO Disney March sets, including a brand new building system for buildable dresses for large-scale figures, which is very interesting, coming up right now. Let's jump in. Okay, so here is our March 2025 Disney lineup. It has 43268 Lilo and Stitch Beach House for $90, Hei Hei set number 43272 for $40, Cinderella's dress set number 43266 for $40, and Maleficent and Cruella de Vil's dresses for $70 as set number 43262. It's a pretty eclectic wave of Disney, introducing a mix between a standard playset based around Lilo and Stitch at long last, a brand new concept for dresses to be buildable LEGO sets, which I'm very curious to see how people react to these, and as well as a buildable character from Moana in the form of Hei Hei the chicken, making it one of the most diverse waves of LEGO Disney yet. The focus of this video will be on the Lilo and Stitch house because that is really the main focus and I think the reason why a lot of people are excited about these sets, but of course I'll be sharing my thoughts on the other sets throughout the rest of the video as well, especially talking a little bit about the dresses, which I feel is almost like Disney's answer to Construction, which is very unique and something that I'm sure is going to be maybe a little bit controversial, but also I can definitely see people liking those. The prices, on the other hand, well, I do have a lot of thoughts on those. But now let's jump into the main focus of this video, which is the very first minifigure scale playset for Lilo and Stitch, which is the Beach House. It comes with 834 pieces and retails for $90 US, which on paper is actually a pretty good deal. That being said, when the build was finished, I'm gonna be honest, it was a little smaller than I expected it to be, especially after seeing images online, and I think a lot of that has to do with how thin the building is. It reminds me a lot of the Up House, which was a very recognizable IP, a very iconic house, but ended up being very shallow with not a lot of room for the minifigures to play inside. I'll start off though by taking a look at the side build of the set, which is just a little jet for Stitch here. It's actually a really clever build that shrinks down the jet that we've seen in the animated series and movie, and I think it's done really well. It's a bit annoying to line up those claw elements on the front of the build there to make sure the clips are actually in line, but once you actually get a bar in there and wiggle it around, it works out just fine. There's a sticker used on the front of the jet here, and you can angle the back jets, which are very cleverly using the LEGO Friends cupcake element as the back exhaust, and while it's smaller than what you would typically want to see for a jet like this, I think it makes sense as the side build of the set, and I'm glad we got something for Stitch. Of course, most of the pieces go into making the house, and I'll start off with what I like. I really love the foliage around the house itself. I feel like it is incredibly detailed, and I like how you can kind of see a bottom layer underneath the house as well. It's a very subtle detail, but it makes it feel like the house is slightly elevated upwards. You have stairs that go up to the main floor, and that's something I really like. It's reusing the door introduced for the LEGO Ideas Home Alone set with the cat door, which of course is basically meant for Stitch, although he doesn't actually fit through the door himself. Rotating the house on its side though really shows just how narrow it is as a build. You can see there's not that much going on for the interior of the house, especially because a lot of the exterior and the thickness is meant to be dedicated to the outside patio. And once you get into the interior, there's a lot of details packed into a very small space, which is both a pro and a con. As a pro, it feels very lived in. It feels like there's a lot of stuff to see and do here, but as a con, there's really not that much space to move minifigures around here. In fact, this entire area with the couch is pretty much just closed off to minifigures just because of all the details they factored in, and even the kitchen itself is incredibly tight and narrow. You have a build for a fridge, which is really nice. It doesn't really open up, but I think it is a nice build for what it is. You've got some sort of a cake that's burnt up on the stove there, which is a nice touch. couch, you have a sink, a boiler area, as well as a dishwasher. There's a lot of details factored in here, and I do have to commend the designers for managing to fit in so many details into so cramped a space. But when all is said and done, you really have only 4, 3, and in some cases 2 studs to pose minifigures, and I feel like that is a bit of a miss. I would really have loved LEGO to do something a bit larger and make this feel more like a playset. Even just extending it out back by 2 more studs I think would have made a big difference, because as it is, it's really hard to get figures in there, and I can see kids getting a little frustrated, especially because the flooring is completely smooth, so you can't really pose up anyone in there unless they're standing perfectly straight. Moving upwards to the upper level, you have an even bigger problem, because here the roof is slanting inwards, making the space you can use pretty much confined to just a single row of studs. It's nice to get the family photo there, although I do question why they didn't include some of the other characters if they clearly have them already ready to go and easily designed. You have some nice Easter eggs on the side of the bed here with the poster on the side of the bed, which I think is a nice little touch, giving a hint towards some other LEGO Disney properties there. You have really nicely built up lamps taking use of the relatively new flower elements, and you even have the bed for Stitch there with a sticker that says Aloha Pineapple, which is a nice little touch. Moving over to the master bedroom area, it's not really much larger than the other bed, but it does have a really nice stickered wall showcasing Easter eggs from the actual animated film, which I think is really cute. I like the amount of detail put in there, and unfortunately a lot of it is covered up by the bed, so if we wiggle that back and forth, we can actually remove the bed there and take a closer look at the sticker inside, where you can see all sorts of different details. Stitch is obviously meant to be a lot smaller than he actually is in person as a minifigure, and I have to wonder if maybe they could have considered making him a separate mold entirely to make him fit in a little bit better to scale with the animated counterpart, but getting him as a minifigure much like the other versions of Stitch we've gotten throughout 2 different series of the Disney collectible minifigures is pretty decent as well, and the bed is nicely shaped. And once again, it's an example of the designers of the set doing more with less. In this case, less pieces and less space, especially in the room. I also like how they were able to use the microfigure as a lamp there. I think that's a really clever touch. There's only one other detail here, and it's hidden behind this new piece for March. It's kind of a half dome element, which I'm sure is going to be very useful for Tatooine builds in tan, but it's this little book with a little bit of a duck inside the book saying I'm lost. It's a very cute sticker and maybe one of my favorite stickers in the set, although of course I am a little biased because I am Duck Bricks after all, but I do think that this set of stickers for the book is just super cute. Look at how sad the poor little duck looks on the cover. It's just a very endearing book. Now we can move on to bring some minifigures into the space, and I think it really exemplifies some of the problems I have with the set as we bring minifigures up to the second level. For instance, you have characters that barely fit in their own rooms, especially with their accessories, and it's just so narrow in terms of the space you can play with figures for. It's nothing really unique compared to what we've seen from a lot of LEGO sets before. Oftentimes, sets go very narrow and emphasize a really nice facade-like exterior, but I feel like for whatever reason, it's hitting these iconic Disney house sets the most. The Up House had the same issue where you could barely fit figures in, and even though this is like 8 studs wide for some of the rooms up here, by the time you actually move into the main upper level, you really only have 1 or 2 rows of workable studs, and that's a bit of a downside for me. On the upside though, the exterior of the house is really good. I love the color scheme, the usage of the newer orange color, nice little references on the surfboards, the little palm trees scattered around utilizing the fern elements. All of those are done really nicely. So it's a bit of a mixed bag for me. I just wish it went a little deeper. Now, in terms of the minifigs included, we have Lilo, Stitch, Nanny, David, and Mr. Bubbles, which is pretty much the perfect selection that you would want. Sure, there are a couple of other characters they could have included, but as far as base minifigures go, I think this makes the most sense to actually have as part of the set. The minifigs themselves are really nicely detailed, and they kind of spared no expense when crafting these characters. This continues the trend of LEGO Disney sets that include minifigures, having the minifigures be exceptionally detailed detailed, and this is no exception. I'm really happy with the way they were able to factor in so many different components, from dual molding to printing to Stitch of course having a specially molded head of his own. All of those details make the figures feel premium. My copy of Stitch had, I'm not sure if it's a misprint or maybe this is common across all the figures, but it was a bit of a print misalignment on the bottom of the mouth there, which does make it look a little bit off, but it's not a big deal, and again, it's something that I'm sure that if you reached out to customer service, you could get a replacement for if you really cared that much. For me, I think it adds a little bit of character and uniqueness to my minifigure, so I'm gonna keep it as is. Of course, the head mold is really well done, and it's utilizing a variety of different colors to really make it pop, which I really do appreciate about the build of this figure. You've got the blue nose, the eyes, just everything about it is really nicely done. The other main character of the series, Lilo, is also portrayed really nicely in minifigure form. They even managed to include toe printing for the sandals on the feet, which is a pretty essential feature, and one that I'm really happy they were able to factor in, especially because it's pretty rare to get printed short legs. The hairpiece is perfect for the figure. I love the fact that you can include the flower, but my favorite part of the figure is the alternate face. With the eyes closed and sticking the tongue out, this is probably one of the funniest expressions for a LEGO minifigure ever, and absolutely one I'll be displaying the figure as because that is just such a cute expression. She does have her signature camera as well, which is a pretty common accessory that we've seen her use throughout the movies, and altogether, while the printing is simple, I really like it. The older sister is also featured in the set here as a really nicely detailed minifigure again, one of the most detailed figures in the set. Nanny here has dual molded arms, printed legs as brand new elements, a brand new printed torso, as well as a new printed head, which means that pretty much every single component of this figure, aside from the hair, which returns from the Disney collectible minifigure series for Pocahontas, is brand new. The figure itself is really nicely done, and it's always a treat to get dual molded components, especially as they become more and more rare in standard LEGO sets, and even just for a standard civilian character, I feel like this really goes to show the amount of detail LEGO can put into a figure. The only thing is that maybe they could have done side printing for the shorts to continue on the legs, but that probably would have been asking for too much for a standard retail set. Lastly, for the members of the main crew, we have David here, who is also really well done, with printing on the side of the arms for the tattoo there, a dual-sided unique alternate expression, as well as new printed legs. This is just another really fantastically detailed minifigure, and I love how pretty much all of the figures necessitated new prints due to them being Hawaiian, and the fact that LEGO doesn't really make Hawaiian minifigures all that often. I think it's really cool that they actually were able to do a lot of extra effort when crafting these figures, and it's definitely one of my favorite characters in the set. Moving onwards, we also have this little stuffed animal which is utilizing the LEGO Dreams little micro figure body. There's not that much else that I have to say about this one. The doll Scrump is really nicely done as a figure, but again, it is just a pretty standard figure. It's a little bit larger than it should be, but I think it does the trick just fine. Lastly, in terms of the characters, we have Mr. Bubbles here, who is, I guess, sort of an antagonistic force in the film, but eventually he does end up joining the members of the family. He is their social worker, and as such, he's probably one of the least detailed minifigures of the set, sporting a plain black suit, but I love the facial printing on the head there. I feel like it just perfectly captures the character. It's a very iconic design from the movie, and seeing that face, you immediately know what character it's supposed to be. The design is maybe a little bit off from what we would normally see for a LEGO standard minifigure detailing, but given that he is such an expressive character with such a unique facial expression in the movies, I think it works well. And bringing all the characters together, you can really see they spared no expense when crafting these figures. Altogether, for $90 US, I definitely do really like what they did with the house. I think that the exterior is really well done, the figures are phenomenal, but I do end up leaving the set feeling that for $90, I kinda wish that there was just a little more interior space. They literally could have just made it just empty space, but extended it out by 2 studs, and I feel like I would have liked that a lot better because it just would have allowed you to have so much more play experiences when putting together the set. I think for 834 pieces, if this was $80, that would have been a much easier pill to swallow, but 90 is a little high for me. But with that, we can move on to the next set of the wave, which is the Chicken Hei Hei. Retailing for $40, he comes with 566 pieces and is a buildable character of the iconic chicken from Moana. For $40, this is actually pretty decent value. It's a really funny sculpture, and I feel like it really captures the essence of the character from the movies, and I also like how good of a parts pack this is. This is incredibly vibrant and colorful. You've got teal and green and blue down in the lower section, and as you work your way up, you have the reds, the oranges, the yellows, and even the dark reds around the eyes, and I feel like this is just a really nice parts pack. Even the base itself has some newly colored flowers, which are new as of last year, which is very nice to see those new flower elements be included in so many other sets. You even have a transparent opalescent satin blue leaf element for the sides of the feathers, and altogether it's just a really fun build. It's not the most stable, and as you can see, it does topple over sometimes, but it is very poseable. You can see that especially around the back for the kind of feathers on the back of the tail there, you can angle them in tons of different directions, back and forth, side to side. You even have some fern elements mounted on clips, and speaking of, I really do like the usage of fern pieces to factor in the feathers of the chicken. Sure, they're used primarily as plants, but I actually think they work really well as feathers here. The head itself can be rotated back and forth, which is a pretty essential feature. That was something I really was looking to be able to play around with, and I think it's also really nicely sculpted. You've got some of those quarter dome elements being used for the side of the head to make it feel more organic, and altogether I just really appreciate the amount of detail factored in here. There's honestly not much else I even have to say about this particular set other than for $40 it feels pretty fair. I love the color scheme, and the only thing that was missing from it is honestly the little minifigure version of Hei Hei. They literally have a specialized piece for Hei Hei the chicken that they use for a lot of the minifigure and mini doll based sets, so I don't really know why they wouldn't include it in this set, especially because similar sets from other LEGO themes, like every time they do a buildable character for LEGO Star Wars, often actually have the minifigure scale component included in the set too. Otherwise though, this is a win in my opinion, and now it's time to move on to much more interesting subject material, which are the dresses. Now, these are really interesting builds, and a lot of people online have very mixed feelings about these dresses. For me, I honestly kinda like them for what they are. I think it's an interesting concept, and it kind of bridges that gap between having a brick-built display model while not having to deal with an actual human character's face, which LEGO has been notoriously hard at trying to figure out how to depict. That being said though, I definitely feel like the biggest con about these sets is the price. This set alone, Cinderella's dress 43266, has 474 pieces, which is actually quite a lot of parts, but retails for $40. And sometimes it's not just about the pieces included, it's about the value you're getting out of the set. This does not feel like $40 worth of value, and a lot of that is inflated by a pretty substantial base that I honestly don't really know that we needed. If these were closer to half that price, like $20 for just the dress, I think they could honestly do a lot better. That being said, it is really cool how they introduced a brand new piece to make these dresses work. It's similar to the octagonal piece with clips, which you see at the bottom here, but instead, they force you to make the clips attach at the very center of the element, which I'm sure is going to be really useful for a ton of future botanical sets. The set also includes a ton of brand new elements, such as the shorter version of the curve element here, that's actually a brand new piece, which is kind of strange in the way they used it here because they basically just take the new bow and add a plate to the bottom of it, making it achieve the same functionality of the older bow, which was just a little bit taller. But you know, I'm not complaining about getting new pieces in new colors, so absolutely bring it on. They also introduced the brand new shorter curve element in gold at the top there, which is really nice to get. A lot of the parts, however, go into this very substantial base, and again, I really don't feel like this was necessary. It's a nice to have, but maybe not a need to have for a set like this. The base opens up and it's pretty elaborate. You have different scenes from Cinderella, from the spinning wheel in there to a nice feast with all sorts of different teacups and pastries, and even space for the mini doll itself to be housed at the back of the base, which is a nice display model, but again, it causes the price to be so much more expensive that honestly, I really don't feel like that was necessary for this model. I would have loved to see LEGO do a lineup of dresses that could have been just like this, but a lot cheaper. The other strange thing about this dress is that it's way too short. If you compare it to the actual dress in the film as well as on the mini doll, it should basically continue all the way down to the bottom of the legs. So don't really know what's going on with that one, but yeah, I guess they maybe just felt they ran out of pieces to use it, which again I say, maybe you didn't need the base, you could have just done it as a larger dress. Similar to what they did for this set here, which is Maleficent and Cruella de Vil's dresses. This has 524 pieces, which is fairly comparable to the $40 Cinderella dress at 474 pieces, but you know what's not comparable? The price. This retails for $70 US, and that is ridiculous. I think that basically seals this set's fate as being put on clearance very, very quickly after it releases. I cannot imagine anybody buying this for $70, and I guess LEGO kind of looked at it and said, hey, well, we're including 2 different dresses, so it feels like you're getting almost double the value of the $40 dress, so why not charge $70 for it and make people feel like they're getting a deal for buying 2? But that's not really how this works. Maybe if both dresses had a unique bottom base stand, they could have justified it, but you really only have one stand, which again, as I said when looking at the Cinderella dress, I don't really think you needed the base stand, and altogether, it's just really strange. It is really nice though to get a Cruella de Vil minifigure, and that is one of the coolest coats I've ever seen for a minifigure or mini doll character. The way it wraps around and the way the fabric is done is super deluxe, and I really do like that. The dress itself for Cruella is a bit strange because it's not the dress she's wearing as the mini doll, but I think it is nice enough as it is. And for Maleficent, this is not our first time we've gotten her as a mini doll, but you can see the dress mounted on the base here, which is meant to serve as a base for either character. You have space to store the mini dolls inside the base, but unfortunately, unlike the other Cinderella dress, there are no scenes from the movies here. There basically is just storage for the mini dolls, which kind of reminds me of the buildable characters we got for Wednesday and Wicked. You've got some printed elements, which is nice, showcasing the year the villains debuted, which is a pretty nice touch, kind of making this set feel like a historical display piece as well, but altogether, I'm just really not seeing the value here. I'm really struggling to see the value in the way these sets are put together. The dress for Maleficent is pretty nice. You have these transparent satin opalescent green elements from Lego dots making an appearance around the sides of the dress, acting almost as magical green smoke, which is super cool. And you also have that new element for the rounded piece with bars on the end of it, which is going to be very, very useful, especially in black, and I cannot wait to see that appear in other colors. But as it is, again, just doesn't feel like it's worth $70 whatsoever. I definitely feel like these dresses are an interesting concept, but something that probably will not perform very well because of the prices. $40 for one is already a lot to ask, but $70 for 2, especially at 500 some pieces, is pretty ridiculous, and I really don't know what LEGO is doing by costing it at that price. But overall, that wraps up my thoughts on the brand new wave of LEGO Disney sets. Again, all of these release March 1st, and thank you to LEGO for sending me these early to review, although of course this review has reflected my very unbiased opinions in case that wasn't obvious when I was talking about the price. Let me know in the comments if you're going to be picking any of these up. I think the most exciting one for almost everybody is the Lilo and Stitch house, although it is cool to see LEGO Disney trying new things and doing different formats for sets. That's all for this video. Thanks so much for tuning in, and be sure to like and subscribe for even more LEGO news, reviews, discussion, and analyses coming your way very soon. Bye for now.